Acquiring a business? BizNexus simplifies it. Access thousands of updated opportunities in our DIY marketplace or supercharge team sourcing with OmniSource, your all-in-one platform for on-market, off-market, and coming-soon deals. Scale smarter today. Learn more or book a demo at www.biznexus.com.
Disclaimer from the always present legal team. Podcast conversations don't necessarily reflect the views of BizNexus Incorporated. Everything you hear is informational news and updates from around the industry. We're not recommending any investments. We're not offering any investment advice. Be sure to do your own homework.
All right, listeners, get ready for today's deep dive. We're diving into a little secret that could mean you walk away with a whole lot more cash when you sell your business. And it's especially powerful if your business is valued somewhere between $2 and $50 million. We're talking about add backs.
Okay.
And to help us break this down, we've got a fantastic report from, the M&A masterminds over at BizNexus.
Right.
It's called Get Ready for This Title. Add backs to EBITDA can substantially increase business valuations. And let me tell you, that title, it's not kidding around.
Yeah.
But before we, get lost in all this financial jargon, I want to bring in our expert, someone who can break this all down in, plain English for us.
Sure.
They basically eat, sleep, and breathe M&A and business valuations.
Yeah.
So I think we're in good hands.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here. And you're absolutely right. Add backs, they can really make a big difference, especially for those businesses you said in the lower middle market, kind of in that sweet spot.
Okay, well, I'm definitely intrigued, but, first things first, for those of us who might not be totally fluent in, finance speak, can you just give us like the quick and dirty on what exactly are these add backs and, why should we even care?
Absolutely, I can do that. So imagine for a second, you're selling your house.
Okay.
What do? You might spruce it up a little bit, right?
Make it look nice.
Maybe you put on a fresh coat of paint, stage it nicely, do a little landscaping, all these sort of little upgrades. They make it more appealing to buyers. And what does that mean?
You can get a better price.
Exactly. You can ask for a higher price because it looks more attractive, right? Well, add backs, they're kind of like that, but for your business.
Okay.
It's about presenting the most attractive possible picture of your company's profitability to those potential buyers.
Okay.
And it's not about being sneaky or hiding anything. It's just about highlighting the true earning potential, showing them what's really possible. You're sort of painting that picture of this is how good it could be.
Okay, I'm starting to see the light here, but how do these add backs actually work? What are we adding back exactly?
Great question. One of the most common add backs, and it's a good place to start, is adjusting what the owner, the business owner gets paid, their compensation.
Okay.
Now, look, there's absolutely nothing wrong with paying yourself a good salary. You've earned it.
Absolutely.
But a potential buyer might not need to take on, that exact same level of expense. They might have somebody else in mind.
Gotcha.
So, for example, let's say you're paying yourself a cool $300,000 a year. But the kind of going rate, the market rate for a similar role is closer to $200,000.
Right.
That difference, that $100,000, that could become a potential add back. It shows the buyer, hey, look, there's room for, maybe some increased profitability here under my management, under, how I do things.
So it's almost like showing them, hey, this business can actually make even more money than it looks like right now. But wouldn't a savvy buyer just see right through that?
That's why, and this is so important, that's why being transparent and having really solid documentation, it's key. You need to be able to back up, justify every add back that you're presenting and show that it's based on real, market data. You're not just making up numbers.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
So I've got adjusting the owner's compensation as one big add back. What are some others?
Another one that comes up pretty often is rent expenses.
Okay.
This is especially true if you own the building where your business is operating.
Right.
If you're kind of, charging your company rent, but it's below market value, that's actually something called a negative add back, meaning it could actually lower what your business is worth.
Wait, really? So even if it's my building, I should still be charging my business fair market rent?
Exactly. You've got to think about it from the buyer's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to look at, okay, what's the true cost of rent here? And it's always better to just be upfront about it from the beginning. In the report, BizNexus, they actually give a really concrete example. They talk about a 20,000 square foot facility where the rent was just $3 per square foot below market.
Okay, that doesn't sound like a lot.
It doesn't, does it? But guess what? That seemingly small difference, it actually resulted in a negative add back of $60,000.
Wow.
And let me tell you, that's money, straight out of your pocket when it comes time to actually sell.
Wow. I honestly never realized something like that could have such a big impact. See, this is why we do these deep dives.
You got it.
All right, so we've got owner compensation, we've got rent. What else should business owners be looking at? What other things could be add backs?
Another area, and this is one that people sometimes get a little squeamish about, another area is personal expenses.
Okay.
Now, this can be a bit of a sensitive topic, but it's really crucial to, be honest with yourself and separate out what are the true business expenses and what are the things that are really personal.
Yeah, but I can see how some business owners might push back on this. They might think, well, I've always done it this way and it's never been a problem. What would you say to that?
I'd say it's never too late to start cleaning things up. And honestly, the cleaner those financials are, the better position you're going to be in when it comes time to sell. It's kind of think of it like this. Those buyers, they're going to be scrutinizing every single thing during that due diligence process.
Right.
They've got professionals on their side who are digging into those numbers. And if you try to kind of, sneak in some personal stuff as business expenses, well, it's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, for sure.
It damages your credibility. It could even derail the whole deal.
Yeah, doesn't sound good.
Nobody wants that.
Yeah. All right. Honesty is the best policy. I got it.
Mm-hmm.
But can you give us some concrete examples here? What are the kinds of personal expenses that business owners maybe accidentally or, sometimes slip into the business accounts?
Sure. It could be anything from, maybe you use the company car for a family vacation.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe you put, a family member on the payroll who isn't actually working in the business.
Right.
Or even sometimes it's running your personal travel or, if you went out to dinner or for entertainment, running that through the company accounts.
I see. I can be pretty subtle sometimes.
It can, and it can add up.
Yeah.
So just being really mindful of where are those blurry lines between the personal and the business spending? And the earlier you start separating them out, the better.
Yeah, makes sense. It sounds like it's not just about selling your business down the line. It's about keeping your financials clean is just a good practice anyway. It helps you make smarter decisions, right?
You got it. And it can make, tax time a lot easier too. Plus, it just sends that signal that you're organized, you run a tight ship, and that's something that buyers are definitely looking for.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've covered, a few of these key add backs, adjusting the owner's compensation, thinking about the rent, and then all those personal expenses. This is already making me want to go back and look at my own books with a magnifying glass. But before we kind of get into the, the nitty gritty here, I want to hear about a real world example. Can you walk us through maybe a case study that shows the power of these add backs in action?
Absolutely. There's a case study that BizNexus highlights in the report that really brings this home. It's about a business that, on the surface, had an EBITDA, remember, that's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. They had an EBITDA of $1 million.
Okay.
Now, let's say for businesses like this, the typical multiple that buyers are using is, 5 times that.
Okay, so 5 times EBITDA.
Yeah, so without any add backs, we're looking at a valuation of, around $5 million.
Yeah, that makes sense. So far, so good. But I have a feeling there's a but coming.
You know me too well. All right, so here's the but. After they did a careful analysis and, applied some totally legitimate add backs, that EBITDA number, it actually jumped up to $1.32 million.
Whoa. That's a pretty big increase.
Yeah, it is. And remember that 5 times multiple.
Yeah.
Well, with the adjusted EBITDA, the business is now suddenly valued at approximately $6.6 million.
Wow. So just by, strategically using these add backs, this business was able to increase its value by over 30%.
Exactly.
That's pretty incredible. I can see why you called these a secret weapon.
And remember, we're not talking about, inflating numbers or anything like that. It's about presenting a clear, accurate picture of what the business is really capable of.
Mm-hmm.
And that impact, it can be huge, especially for those business owners, again, in the lower middle market where, every dollar counts.
Yeah, I can see that. This is all incredibly eye-opening. I think our listeners are, really starting to see the light here.
I hope so.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to touch on one more thing that I think is super important: documentation. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is to have everything in order when it comes to these add backs? What kind of documentation are we talking about?
You're spot on. Documentation, it is absolutely critical. Think of it like building a case, a solid case to present to those buyers. You need to have your detailed income statements, your expense reports, tax returns, anything that can back up what you're saying, anything that substantiates those add backs. The key is to be organized. You want to have a clear audit trail, be able to prove that every add back is legit, it's justifiable.
So no trying to fudge the numbers or slip anything under the radar. Honesty is the best policy, right?
Absolutely. Transparency is key here. If buyers find inconsistencies or discrepancies during that due diligence process, well, it's going to raise some red flags. And it could seriously damage your credibility. And in the worst case scenario, it could even kill the deal.
Yikes. Okay, this is all really fascinating stuff. We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've talked about what add backs are, looked at some common examples, even seen, the power of them with a real-world case study. But, this is just the beginning. When we come back in part 2, we're going to delve even deeper into this world of add backs and explore some practical strategies for identifying them and documenting them effectively. So, stay tuned.
Can't wait.
Welcome back to the deep dive. I'm still kind of reeling from all those add back revelations from part 1.
Yeah.
Like discovering this, hidden treasure chest.
I love that. And you know what? You don't even need a map to find this treasure. You just need the right information and a little bit of planning.
Exactly. And I know our listeners are ready to learn how they can actually put all of this to work in their own businesses.
For sure.
So let's get down to, the nitty gritty here.
Okay.
Where do we even begin?
Well, the first step might sound really obvious, but it's something that a lot of business owners, they just don't do it. And that is, you need to start thinking about potential add backs right now, even if you don't think you're going to sell for years.
Really? So even if I'm years away from selling, this is something I should be thinking about already.
Absolutely. It's all about, making smart decisions today that are going to pay off big time down the road. Plus, let's be honest, most business owners, they don't have, these perfectly pristine, separated financials. It takes time to get everything organized and, in order.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. So how can we start kind of, getting in shape financially?
One of the simplest things you can do, but it's so powerful, is just sit down and really review your financials with a critical eye. Go through everything, your income statements, your expense reports, the whole shebang.
Okay.
And as you're going through things, just ask yourself this question. Is this a true, legitimate business expense? Or is it really more of a personal thing?
Oh, I bet there are so many things that I've probably categorized as business expenses that are really, personal.
You'd be surprised. I mean, think about it, that weekly massage, or those fancy dinners with friends that you might have talked some business at.
Yeah.
All those little things, they can add up big time.
Okay, so being more mindful of those personal expenses, that's a good place to start. What else can we do to kind of clean things up?
Start separating those personal expenses from the business expenses like they are oil and water. It might mean getting a separate credit card just for business stuff, or meticulously tracking your mileage if you're using your car for both personal and business use. Whatever it takes to keep things distinct.
Okay, so it sounds like organization is really key here. It's not just about being honest. It's about being able to prove it.
Right. You got it. You want that clear paper trail. Not only does it help you identify those add backs, it also makes things like, taxes a breeze. Plus, it just sends that good signal to those potential buyers that you are organized. You run a tight ship.
That makes sense.
Uh-huh.
So I'm being mindful of my expenses. I'm separating personal from business. What comes next?
All right, so once you've got a handle on your own financials, it's time to do a little recon, a little industry research. Find out what other businesses, companies in your sector, what are they paying for things like salaries, rent, benefits, all that good stuff.
So basically doing my homework, comparing myself to the competition. It sounds a lot like, getting ready for a big presentation.
Yeah, like making sure all your ducks are in a row. Because, that's what you're doing, right? You're preparing to show off your business in the best light possible to those potential buyers.
Okay, I like it. All right, so I've got my financials squared away. I've done my research on, industry benchmarks.
Mm-hmm.
What's the final piece of the puzzle here?
The final piece, and this is probably the most important one, is to bring in the experts, the big guns. And that's an M&A professional. They're the pros when it comes to valuations and these add backs.
Okay.
They can help you spot things you might have missed. They'll validate your assumptions and make sure all your documentation is bulletproof.
So they're like my secret weapon.
Yeah, you could say that. They'll help you get every dollar you deserve.
Awesome. But isn't it kind of risky to bring in an M&A advisor too early? What if I'm not, like, totally ready to sell yet?
That's a really common misconception. Remember, an M&A advisor isn't just there for, the paperwork when you're ready to sign on the dotted line. They can be so valuable throughout the whole journey, even years before you actually sell.
Oh, okay. So it's more like having, a trusted partner who can help me set the stage for a successful exit down the line.
Exactly. They can help you identify those areas where you can improve your financials, develop a smart plan to maximize that valuation, and just, help you navigate the whole, sometimes crazy world of M&A.
Okay, I'm convinced. Having an expert on your side, it seems like it's really invaluable.
It is.
But before we move on, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about, separating those personal and business expenses. What if I've already been, using my business to cover some of those personal costs? Can I go back and, adjust things?
That's a tricky one, and it really depends on the specifics of your situation. And, I've got to say, we're not accountants, we're not tax advisors, so it's always best to get professional advice on stuff like this.
Right, so no DIY accounting, got it. But, in general, is it ever possible to go back and, change things?
Well, you can't rewrite history, unfortunately. But the good news is you can start fresh going forward. The cleaner your financials are from this point on, the better off you're going to be when it comes time to sell.
Okay, so even if my past financials aren't, perfect, I can still make changes now to improve things for the future. It's not a lost cause.
Absolutely not. It's never too late to start building those good financial habits. And buyers, they're more interested in that future potential anyway.
Right.
If you can show them that you've got a grip on those expenses, you're running a tight ship, well, that's sending all the right signals.
That's good to hear. So let's recap for our listeners what we've talked about in this part. We've hit on, thinking about add backs early, reviewing those financials carefully, separating out personal and business expenses, and then doing that research on industry benchmarks. And then finally, that really crucial step of talking to an M&A professional.
Yeah.
Anything else that business owners should keep in mind as they, get started on all of this?
I do have a couple of kind of bonus tips, especially for those in that lower middle market, where things can be extra competitive.
Okay, love bonus tips.
All right, so number one, don't be afraid to negotiate. Add backs, they're not set in stone. Buyers, they might push back on some things, and that's totally okay. Just be prepared to have that conversation, Come to a solution that works for everyone.
So it's more of an art than a science.
Exactly. There's a strategy involved.
Okay, what's bonus tip number 2?
All right, tip number 2, and this is a big one, be realistic. Don't try to inflate those add backs with, crazy expenses or things that you can't really back up. Remember, transparency and that documentation, those are key. Buyers, they're going to see right through any sort of attempts to, pull the wool over their eyes.
Honesty is the best policy, once again.
It always is.
Okay. Any other, words of wisdom before we wrap up this part?
One last thing, and I think this is really important. Selling a business, it can be emotional. There are a lot of moving pieces, and it can be easy to, get overwhelmed. Having a good M&A advisor, someone in your corner, can make all the difference in the world. They can help you deal with all the complexities, negotiate effectively, and ultimately just make sure you get the best possible outcome.
Those are all amazing tips. I feel like we've, really peeled back the layers and kind of, uncovered the secrets here to maximizing those valuations. But before we wrap up part 2, I want to leave our listeners with a few concrete actions they can take, right now, today.
Love it. Let's give them some homework.
Okay, so listeners, here's what you can do today to get started. Number 1, start thinking about those add backs right now. Even if you're not planning on selling for years, start separating out those personal and business expenses and, do that research. Look at those industry benchmarks. Figure out where you stand. Number 2, sit down with those financials and look at them closely. Be honest with yourself. Are there any personal expenses mixed in there with those business expenses? Start cleaning things up. And the goal is to create that clear, accurate picture of what your business is really capable of. And number 3, This is a big one. Reach out and talk to an M&A professional. These are the experts. These are the folks who can help you identify and validate those add backs, make sure your documentation is all in order, and just guide you through that whole process.
Those are great action steps, really breaking it down to the essentials. I think starting early is really key. It can make a huge difference down the line when it comes to getting the best possible price for your business.
Yeah. I think our listeners are ready to tackle the world of add backs now.
I think so, too.
But before we sign off for part 2, I want to leave everyone with one final thought. Imagine this. You've put in all the hard work. You've built this successful business, and now you're ready to move on to the next chapter, whatever that looks like for you. Wouldn't you want to know that you got every single penny you deserved for all that effort? Well, understanding these add backs and, using them in a smart way, it can help make that a reality. It's not about tricks or shortcuts. It's about, presenting your business in the best possible light and making sure that all your hard work really pays off.
Well said.
So go out there, dear listeners, and, conquer this world of add backs. We'll be back with part 3, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back to, the final part of our deep dive here into maximizing those business valuations. We've covered a lot of ground, but I'm excited to bring it all home and, make sure our listeners are feeling like they can go out there and really take action.
Me too. We've really, I think, uncovered some powerful stuff here, especially for, those business owners in that $2 to $50 million range thinking about, maybe selling down the line.
Right. So let's do like a super quick recap of what we've talked about so far.
Okay.
We started by demystifying EBITDA.
Right.
Remember, that's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. That all-important metric for, figuring out how much a business is actually worth. But we realize it's not just about EBITDA. It's about adjusted EBITDA.
Exactly, yeah. Adjusted EBITDA, it's kind of like, you're looking under the hood of the car. It gives those potential buyers, it gives them that much clearer picture of, what's the earning potential here? What can this business really do?
And that's where those magical add backs come in, right?
You got it.
We talked about how, adjusting the owner's compensation, thinking about those rent expenses, and then carefully, really scrutinizing those personal expenses. They can make a huge difference in that valuation.
Yes.
I mean, we even walked through that case study from the BizNexus report. Remember that one?
Yeah, the one where
that business with $1 million in EBITDA was able to bump up its valuation to $6.6 million.
Yeah, that was a good one.
A whopping 32% increase just by, strategically thinking about those add backs.
Exactly. And that's what gets people excited. It's not just theoretical. It's like real money.
It is. It's like that's the kind of impact that, gets me fired up. It shows this is real. This can really happen.
It can. But we also talked about, not all add backs are created equal.
Right.
Those buyers, they're smart, they do their homework and they can sniff out a phony ad back a mile away.
Yeah.
So that transparency and documentation, those are absolutely crucial.
Oh, for sure. Like trying to slip in some made-up expenses, it's playing with fire.
It is.
It'll backfire like during due diligence, and it could blow up the whole deal.
Yeah, nobody wants that. Remember, the goal is to be fair, to be accurate. You want to show them what's possible, but not play games.
Right, right. And I think we did a good job giving our listeners some, actual steps they can take.
I think so, too.
Even if they're not, thinking about selling right this second.
Starting early is key.
Yeah, start to think about these add backs, even if it's years down the road. And then, like, going through your financials, with that magnifying glass, separating the personal stuff from the business stuff, those are good habits for anyone, really.
Absolutely.
Selling or not.
Yeah.
And, of course, we can't forget talking to an M&A professional.
Yeah, the experts.
Those are the folks who can, hold your hand, guide you through this whole thing.
They're worth their weight in gold.
Yeah, for sure. So, as we wrap up this whole deep dive, what's one, final thought, something that you would leave our listeners kind of pondering?
Ooh, that's a good one. How about this? Imagine you're standing there, you're about to sell your business. All that hard work, all those years, it's all led up to this. Are you confident you've done everything you can to get the best possible price? Or are you, leaving money on the table?
Oof. Yeah, that's a powerful one. Really emphasizes this isn't just about theory. This is about, potentially a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And, understanding these add backs, using them in a smart way. It could be the difference between, a good exit and a truly amazing one.
I have a feeling this is going to spark a lot of good conversations out there and, maybe even inspire some people to take action.
That's what we like to hear. Well, it's been awesome diving deep into this with you.
The pleasure's been all mine.
To all our listeners, remember, knowledge is power, taking action is key. Go forth and, maximize those valuations. And thanks to all of our amazing listeners for joining us on this journey. We hope you found it helpful and, that you feel empowered. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Thinking of exiting your business or taking on a private equity partner to help you grow faster? BizNexus has you covered. Tap into our network of thousands of best-fit investors, acquirers, and proven M&A advisors, and we'll help you begin the relationship confidentially on your terms, your timeline. Learn more at biznexus.com.